On May 22nd, 1969, three NASA astronauts were completely alone on the far side of the moon. No radio contact with Earth, no signal, no way to call for help. Then they heard music. Not from their equipment, not from each other. Something they couldn't identify. Something they debated whether to even report. Something NASA classified for 40 years. In this video, we're going through 4 NASA recordings. Recordings that were either classified, deliberately erased, or quietly buried in an archive. You'll hear what astronauts said in their final moments. You'll find out what NASA erased from history and later admitted to. And you'll hear the one recording that scientists, engineers, and former NASA officials still cannot fully explain. Everything in this video is documented. The transcripts are real. The admissions are real. What you do with that information is up to you. NASA has been recording everything since 1958. Every mission, every voice loop, every conversation between astronauts and ground control. Thousands of hours of audio from the most dangerous missions in human history. But not all of it was meant to be heard. Some recordings were classified, marked sensitive for national security reasons. Some were quietly erased in the 1970s and 80s to save on storage costs. And some simply disappeared with no official explanation.
That is music even sounds outer spacey, doesn't it? Do you hear that? That whistling sound?
It wasn't until journalists, engineers, and historians began filing Freedom of Information requests that some of these tapes finally surfaced. What they found changed how we understand the space program. We start with the strangest, because this first tape doesn't just raise questions about what NASA hid. It raises questions about what's out there. May 1969, 3 weeks before the most famous moment in human history. Apollo 10 was the dress rehearsal for the moon landing, everything except the actual touchdown. Commander Thomas Stafford, Command Module Pilot John Young, and Lunar Module Pilot Gene Cernan flew the lunar module to within 47,000 feet of the moon's surface, the lowest any human being had ever been. Then they flew behind the moon. For approximately 1 hour, they lost all contact with Earth. No radio, no telemetry, no mission control. Just 3 men in a vehicle the size of a large SUV orbiting a dead rock 250,000 miles from home. And in the mission transcripts that NASA didn't release for 40 years, you can read exactly what happened.
That is music even sounds outer spacey, doesn't it? Do you hear that? That whistling sound?
They debated for the rest of that orbit whether to report it, whether anyone would believe them. When they finally landed, they did report it. NASA's official response? Unexplained electromagnetic interference, possibly whistling radio signals caused by charged particles interacting with the lunar magnetic field. Except that explanation has a problem. The sound lasted nearly an hour. It followed a rhythm, a pattern, not random static. And it disappeared precisely the moment they came back around the moon and reestablished contact with Earth. NASA classified the transcripts. They sat in a government archive for 4 decades. In 2008, as part of a broader declassification program, a researcher found a section of the Apollo 10 transcripts marked anomalous audio phenomena. Gene Cernan spoke about it publicly once before his death in 2017. He said, "I don't know what it was. I'm not saying it was anything, but I know what we heard." We still don't have a better explanation. Unexplained sound is one thing. The next tape is different because we know exactly what caused it. And NASA knew before it happened. January 27th, 1967. Launchpad 34, Cape Canaveral, Florida. Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Chaffee were inside the Apollo 1 capsule. Not flying, not preparing to fly, just running a routine pre-launch systems test. The rocket was on the ground, engines off, no fuel in the tanks. It should have been one of the safest days in the entire program. Grissom had been complaining about the capsule for months. The radio kept cutting out during tests. Oxygen systems smelled wrong. Wiring behind the instrument panels was a tangled mess. Engineers had documented it. He was so frustrated that before the test that day, he hung an actual lemon on the hatch door. A protest, a message. Nobody laughed. At 6:30 in the evening, Mission Control heard something they'd never heard before. A voice, believed to be Roger Chaffee, shouted, "Fire! I smell fire!" 2 seconds later, a second voice, "Fire in the cockpit!" Then sounds that mission controllers later described as screaming. The audio transmission lasted 17 seconds. Then silence. The hatch was designed to open inward, then outward, a 3-step process that took a minimum of 90 seconds from the outside. The fire burned at over 1,400 degrees Fahrenheit. The pure oxygen atmosphere in the sealed capsule turned the cockpit into a furnace. All 3 astronauts were dead within seconds. What came after is what NASA tried hardest to suppress. An engineer named Thomas Barron had been documenting safety problems with the Apollo program for over a year. He had a 500-page report, detailed, specific, damning. He requested to present it to a congressional subcommittee. 1 month after Grissom, White, and Chaffee died, Thomas Barron was struck and killed by a train at a level crossing near his home. The official verdict: suicide. His 500-page report was never recovered. NASA's internal investigation into the Apollo 1 fire was classified for years. When it was finally released, it showed that NASA engineers had flagged wiring problems in the capsule months before the fire. The agency had received written warnings. They launched anyway. Gus Grissom told his wife Betty before the mission, "If there's ever a serious accident in the space program, it might very well be me." Apollo 1 was a warning that cost 3 lives. The next story is different, because NASA didn't just ignore a warning. They erased the evidence itself. July 20th, 1969. The most watched moment in human history. 600 million people around the world stopped what they were doing and sat in front of their television sets to watch Neil Armstrong step onto the moon. The image was grainy, black and white. The resolution was low, but it was real, and it was live. What most people don't know is that NASA had better footage. Much better. The original slow-scan television recordings of the moonwalk were captured at 3 ground stations around the world: California, Spain, and Parkes Observatory in Australia. The raw footage from those stations, before it was processed and broadcast to television networks, was significantly higher quality than anything the world saw that day. In 2006, NASA began an official search for those original recordings. In 2009, they announced what they'd found. The tapes were gone. Approximately 45 magnetic data tapes from the Apollo era had been erased and reused sometime in the 1970s and 1980s. NASA was facing storage shortages. Someone, and no individual was ever identified, made the decision to record over the originals. The best footage of the first moon landing no longer exists. NASA spent 3 years and $1.8 million attempting to reconstruct the best available version from old television broadcast recordings. What they released in 2009 was the result, improved through digital restoration, but still television quality. The originals are gone. But the erasure didn't stop at footage. In 2012, researchers discovered that approximately 700 boxes of original Apollo-era mission data tapes were missing from NASA's archives. Voice recordings, telemetry, biomedical data from multiple missions. Some tapes eventually surfaced in private storage facilities. Some appeared at auction. Astronauts had apparently taken tapes home over the years as personal souvenirs. And some have simply never been found. We do not have complete audio records from multiple Apollo missions. What the astronauts said when they thought no one was listening, on the dark side of the moon, in the quiet hours between transmissions, we may never know. But there is one tape we do have, one that NASA didn't erase and didn't classify, because by the time they found it, it was already too late. February 1st, 2003. Space Shuttle Columbia was 16 minutes from landing. Commander Rick Husband, pilot William McCool, and 5 mission specialists had been in space for 16 days. A successful science mission. They were coming home. They didn't know what we know now. During launch, 16 days earlier, a piece of foam insulation had broken off the external fuel tank and struck the left wing of the orbiter. A hole, approximately 6 to 10 inches wide, was created in the reinforced carbon panels of the leading edge. Engineers on the ground had noticed. They submitted a formal request for satellite imagery of the wing to assess the damage. Mission management reviewed the request. They denied it. Foam strikes, they said, were not a safety concern. They were wrong. As Columbia re-entered the atmosphere at 200,000 feet, superheated plasma began entering the left wing through that breach. Sensors in the wing began failing. First one, then several at once. The temperature inside the wing structure reached 2,000 degrees. In mission control, the telemetry data cut out. Controllers stared at blank screens. In the cockpit, the crew knew something was wrong. The last recorded voice transmission from Columbia was Commander Rick Husband. 2 words. Roger, then nothing. Columbia disintegrated over Texas and Louisiana at approximately 9 a.m. local time. Debris fell across more than 2,000 square miles. All 7 crew members were killed. 6 months later, searchers combing through the debris field near Hemp Hill, Texas, found a small orange cylinder partially buried in the undergrowth. It was the Orbiter Experiment Recorder, a data recorder designed to survive exactly this kind of event. The recorder contained approximately 4 minutes of data from the final moments of the flight. Conversations, sensor readings, everything the cockpit experienced as the vehicle came apart. NASA released a partial transcript of those recordings. The full audio has never been made public. The Columbia Accident Investigation Board later found that warning flags had been raised at multiple levels. Engineers who tried to escalate concerns about the foam strike were dismissed. Management culture prioritized schedule over safety. It was not the first time. Rick Husband was a devout Christian. Before the mission, he recorded a video message for his home congregation, to be played in the event he didn't return. He didn't return. The message was played. 4 tapes, 4 missions, different decades, different disasters, different official explanations, but one pattern. NASA knew. About the wiring in Apollo 1, about the foam strike on Columbia, about the missing archive tapes, about the unexplained audio from Apollo 10. And in each case, someone made a decision about what the public needed to know, and when they needed to know it. We've put humans on the moon 6 times. We've maintained continuous human presence in orbit for over 25 years. We've sent probes to the edge of the solar system and beyond. And yet, we've lost the original footage of the greatest achievement in human history. We've classified the last words of people who gave their lives to get us there. And we still cannot fully explain what 3 astronauts heard alone on the far side of the moon in May of 1969. Gene Cernan returned to the moon 3 years later on Apollo 17. He became the last human to walk on the lunar surface. When he stepped back into the lunar module for the final time, he said, "We leave as we came, and God willing, as we shall return, with peace and hope for all mankind." He never went back. Nobody has. And somewhere in a NASA archive, in one of those 700 missing boxes, or in a drawer that hasn't been opened in 40 years, there may be more tapes, more transmissions, more voices from the silence. We just don't know what they say yet.